When a sliver of cold moonlight in the deep night of ancient Greece slanted across the crossroads at the edge of the underworld, a path thick with blooming black poppies, the air was steeped in the faint scent of amber and the bittersweet crispness of night mist. Within an inner chamber shrouded by heavy shadows, where the distant murmur of the river Lethe could be heard, a man draped in raven wings, his eyes reflecting a sense of universal desolation, sat in absolute stillness, opening his hands which were as fair as translucent marble. He was not wiping a cold scythe. Instead, upon a yellowed parchment, he used an exceedingly delicate script to record the frequency of the final breaths of those who returned this day, even noting in the margin a certain rhythm for eternal rest. He was Thanatos, the most silent executor among the gods, a man who mended mercy within the land of death's shadow, and quietly shook hands with fate in the heart of the night. This is a chronicle of how restraint erupts into power, and how coldness is transmutated into nobility. The genesis of Thanatos' life held none of the radiance characteristic of the gods. Instead, it was a deep gray foundation woven from pure black and extreme silence within the maternal shadow known as Nyx's night. As a divine son in charge of termination, he inherited a microcosm that was ruthlessly cold, feared by all living things, yet governed by an exquisite sense of the dignity of duty. In corridors crimsoned by the glow of phosphorus fire, he learned to use his gaze to capture every texture of letting go within the anatomy of life. When he first appeared at the edge of a battlefield, facing warriors who hurled cursed glances his way, he felt not anger, but a profound stillness, as if he had finally discovered the pedestal of his own soul. He understood that duty was not maintained through fear, but was a sacred logic that revealed itself naturally through an ultimate respect for the procedure of death. If his early years of obedience were a hijacking by fate, then the stage of the divine gambit known as the Golden Fall was the practical crucible that pushed Thanatos' aesthetics of restraint to its absolute zenith. He overthrew the crude reaping methods of his ancestors, dedicating himself instead to advancing a process known as the intellectual farewell. He sought to replace endless physical struggle with a gentle touch. In those quiet nights, where only the grinding of stones in the Lethe could be heard, he issued silent commands that stabilized the order of the homeward journey through ruthlessly precise calculations of karmic weight and soul purity. This mode of labor required no hot-blooded passion, yet it transformed the end of life into an intellectual game of chess played with mathematics. In those moments, Thanatos was the most sober and solitary artisan of the Mediterranean, like a marble bell tower, solitary and soaring, yet indestructible. The summit of power in the eyes of the wise is often manifested as the penetration of truth. Thanatos gradually realized that when he was briefly suspended by a mortal's trickery in the famous bondage of Sisyphus, he had obtained not just liberation, but a nihilistic clarity that saw through the rise and fall of all things. He discovered that grand divine ideals, once thought invincible, turned into a fragility more powerful than any curse when faced with the peaceful gaze of that sweating man pushing his stone before death. This expansive clarity became his hardest armor in his later years. He wrote in his diary, "I once believed I was harvesting history, now I find I am merely searching for a point of convergence within the scarred fissures of marble, where the soul no longer falls." The final mythic season of Thanatos was spent in a state of profound solemnity and a silence illuminated by the radiance of a sage. It was the early autumn of the mythic era's decline. The reins of the underworld fell soundlessly. By then, the death god's cloak hung loosely upon his slender frame. He understood that the heroic age of Olympus was drawing to its close, and that he, the guardian of order, would soon be buried in the dust of legend. In his final conscious moments, using those hands that had held 10,000 scepters and caressed 10,000 sorrows, he traced a final arc across his chest, representing resolution. The north wind carried away the final sigh of this great hermit, marking the official end of the era known as the dawn of order, fading out in an exceedingly stable resonance. Even today, 2 millennia after the myths faded, the name Thanatos remains the sole sanctuary for many insomniac seekers in the deep of night. What he left behind was not a towering monument of triumph, but a spiritual template of self-restraint and noble departure. He teaches us that even if the entire world besieges you with turmoil, the order of your inner self remains governed by your perception of truth. In absolute shadow, he maintained absolute sobriety. Beneath the old sight of the underworld, worn smooth by history, he maintains that posture of leaning his head to listen, as if still soothing this increasingly restless and anxious world. His life was an intellectual long march seeking sacred rhythms amidst the chaotic dust of the world. Thanatos' story thus draws to a slow close amidst the fading whispers of the tides of the Lethe. He was never an opportunist who bartered his essence for fame. He was merely a weary soul who steadfastly refused to compromise with mediocrity. Inner tranquility is your only true and eternal refuge. Please believe that in every person's life, there is a midnight diary of their own, a private space for dialogue with the self that requires no outward explanation. Tonight's story is over. May Thanatos' serenity and vastness become the softest feather in your dreams, carrying you to the farthest, most tranquil shore of the soul. Good night, and may sweet dreams be with you.